The snow came down in thick curtains that Christmas Eve, blanketing the Montana Territory in white silence. Thomas Brennan stood on the porch of his ranch house, watching the storm gather strength as darkness settled over the valley. He was a man carved by hard years, his face weathered like the fence posts that lined his property, his hands scarred from rope and leather and the thousand small violences of working the land. At 43, he had built something solid from nothing, but the house behind him echoed with an emptiness that no amount of cattle or acres could fill. His wife Margaret had been gone 5 years now, taken by pneumonia one bitter February when the doctor couldn't make it through the drifts in time. His daughter Sarah had married a merchant from Helena and moved east 2 years back, promising to visit but never quite finding the time. His son Daniel had lasted one winter after his mother's death before heading to California, chasing gold or dreams or whatever it was young men needed that a ranch couldn't provide. Thomas didn't blame them. The land demanded everything and gave back only what you could wrestle from it. It was no life for those who weren't built for the wrestling. He was about to go inside when he saw her, a dark shape moving through the white, stumbling more than walking. At first he thought it was a deer or perhaps his eyes playing tricks in the swirling snow. But then the shape fell, and he saw it was a woman, her dark dress barely visible against the mounting drifts. Thomas grabbed his coat and ran, his boots crunching through snow already ankle-deep. She was trying to stand when he reached her, her lips blue, her whole body shaking with cold. She couldn't have been more than 25, with dark hair plastered to her face and eyes that held a fierce determination even as her legs gave way beneath her. Thomas caught her before she fell again, feeling how light she was, how close to breaking that he carried her to the house without asking questions. There would be time for questions if she lived. He kicked open the door and brought her to the fire, pulling off her frozen shawl and the thin coat that had done nothing against the storm. Her fingers were white at the tips, her breathing shallow and rapid. Thomas wrapped her in blankets and built up the fire until the room glowed with heat, then made coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She drank it when he held the cup to her lips, coughing at first, then taking slow, deliberate sips. Color began to return to her face, though she still shook beneath the layers of wool. Thomas sat back and waited, knowing she would speak when she was ready. It took nearly an hour. The storm howled outside, piling snow against the windows, sealing them in together. Finally, her voice came, hoarse and uncertain. "Thank you," she said. "I thought I was going to die out there." Thomas nodded. "You were close to it. What were you doing walking in a Christmas blizzard?" Her eyes dropped to the cup in her hands. "I had nowhere else to go." The words hung in the air between them, carrying weight Thomas recognized. He had heard that particular note of desperation before, in the voices of men who had lost everything, in the eyes of families whose wagons had broken down with winter coming on. "Where did you come from?" She hesitated, and he could see her measuring how much truth to tell. "Copperfield," she said finally, naming a mining town 2 days' ride to the south. "I was working at the boarding house there. The owner died last month, and his son closed the place. Told us all to find other work." Her hands tightened around the cup. There wasn't any other work. Not for women without connections. Thomas understood what she wasn't saying. Mining towns had certain expectations of women without families or means. The choices narrowed quickly, and none of them were good. "You walked from Copperfield in this?" "I had a horse at first," she said quietly. "Borrowed it from a man who said he'd give me a ride to the next town. But when we were a few miles out, he made it clear what he wanted in payment." Her jaw tightened. "I took the horse and ran." It threw me this afternoon when the snow started. I've been walking since then. Thomas poured more coffee for both of them. Outside, the wind shrieked like something alive and angry. "You're lucky you made it here," he said. "This is the only ranch for 15 miles in any direction." She looked at him then, really looked at him, her eyes searching his face for something. "I saw your lights from the road. I didn't know if you'd help me or turn me away." Her voice dropped. Most men would have expectations. Thomas felt a flash of anger, not at her but at the world that had taught her to expect that. "I'm not most men," he said simply. "You needed help. That's enough." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the storm rage. Thomas found himself studying her when she wasn't looking. She had a strength in her face despite the exhaustion, a resilience that reminded him of Margaret. His wife had come west in a wagon train, had buried 2 children before Sarah lived, had worked alongside him through droughts and harsh winters without complaint. She had been steel-wrapped in calico, and he saw something similar in this stranger by his fire. "I'm Thomas Brennan," he said finally. "This is my ranch. The Broken Creek." "Clara," she replied. "Clara Westfield." She paused, then added, "I don't have any money. I can't pay you for your kindness." Thomas waved that away. "It's Christmas Eve. Nobody should be alone on Christmas Eve." Clara's eyes glistened, and she blinked rapidly. "I have nowhere to go," she said, the words barely above a whisper. "After the storm, I don't know where I'll go. But I know how to cook. I can work. If you need help around the place, I can earn my keep until I figure out what comes next." Thomas looked at her, at this woman who had walked through a blizzard rather than surrender her dignity, who was offering to work rather than beg for charity. He thought about the empty house, the meals he ate standing at the stove because sitting at the table alone was too much silence. He thought about Margaret, who had always said the measure of a man was in how he treated those who had nothing to offer him in return. "The storm will last at least 2 more days," he said. "Maybe 3. After that, we'll talk about what comes next. For now, you're welcome here. There's a spare room upstairs. It was my daughter's before she left." Relief flooded Clara's face, followed quickly by something fiercer, a determination. "I meant what I said about cooking. And I can clean, mend clothes, help with whatever needs doing. I won't be a burden." Thomas stood and added another log to the fire. "We'll sort it out after you've rested. Right now, you need sleep more than anything." He showed her to Sarah's old room, which still held traces of his daughter's presence in the faded curtains and the carved wooden box on the dresser. Clara stood in the doorway as if afraid to enter, as if comfort was something she'd forgotten how to accept. Thomas lit the lamp and put fresh wood in the small stove. "There are extra blankets in the chest," he said. "If you need anything, I'm just down the hall." Clara turned to him, and in the lamplight, he could see tears tracking down her cheeks. "Why are you being so kind?" she asked. "You don't know me. I could be anyone." Thomas thought about that. "My wife used to say that kindness doesn't require knowing someone. It just requires seeing them." He gestured at her, at the worn dress and tired eyes and proud set of her shoulders despite everything. "I see you, Miss Westfield. I see someone who needs help, and I have help to give. It's as simple as that." He left her then, closing the door softly behind him. Downstairs, he sat by the fire for a long time, listening to the storm and thinking about the strange turns life took. This morning he had been alone with his cattle and his memories. Now there was someone else in the house, someone breathing and alive, and the silence didn't press quite so heavy. Christmas morning broke clear and brutally cold, the storm having exhausted itself sometime before dawn. Thomas woke to the smell of coffee and something else, something he hadn't smelled in years. He dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Clara in the kitchen, her hair pinned back, wearing one of Margaret's old aprons over her dress. The stove was hot, and on it, a pan of biscuits browned while bacon sizzled in the skillet. She turned when she heard him, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "I hope you don't mind. I woke up early and couldn't go back to sleep. I thought I should make myself useful." Thomas sat at the table, and for the first time in 5 years, someone else set breakfast in front of him. The biscuits were perfect, light and buttery. The bacon was crisp without being burnt. The coffee was strong and hot. He ate slowly, savoring not just the food but the simple fact of not eating alone. "This is good," he said, and Clara's face lit up with a smile that transformed her, made her look younger and less haunted. "Really good. My mother taught me," Clara said, sitting across from him with her own plate. "She said a woman who could cook would never starve. I guess she was right." They ate in comfortable quiet, the winter sun streaming through the windows, making the snow outside sparkle like scattered diamonds. After breakfast, Clara insisted on washing up while Thomas tended to the livestock. He found himself hurrying through the chores, eager to get back to the house, to the sound of someone moving around in it, to the smell of something other than his own coffee and loneliness. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Clara took over the kitchen and proved herself as good as her word. She cooked meals that reminded Thomas of his mother's table, hearty and honest and full of care. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, opening up rooms Thomas had closed off, letting light back into corners that had grown dark. She mended his clothes, fixed the curtains that had been hanging crooked for 3 years, and brought order to the chaos Thomas had learned to live with, but more than that, she brought life. She hummed while she worked, old songs Thomas half remembered from his childhood. She asked him questions about the ranch, genuinely interested in the answers. She sat with him by the fire in the evenings, reading from the few books on his shelf or working on needlepoint while he whittled, and the silence between them was comfortable rather than empty. Thomas found himself watching her when she didn't notice, wondering at the strange gift the storm had brought him. She never spoke much about her past, and he didn't push. Some things were better left buried until they were ready to be unearthed. But he learned small things. She had grown up in Ohio, the daughter of a schoolteacher. Her parents had died in a fire when she was 18. She had come west with an uncle who had died on the journey, leaving her stranded in Copperfield with nothing but her wits and her determination. 3 weeks passed, then 4. The snow melted enough to make the roads passable, but neither of them mentioned Clara leaving. Thomas told himself he was just giving her time to recover, to figure out her next move. But he knew it was more than that. The house had come alive again, and he wasn't ready to let it fall back into darkness. It was Clara who finally brought it up, on a bright January morning when the air was sharp enough to cut. She found Thomas in the barn, checking on a calf that had been born weak. "Mr. Brennan," she said, and her formality made him look up. "We need to talk." Thomas straightened, bracing himself. "All right." Clara twisted her hands together, nervous in a way he hadn't seen since that first night. "I've been here over a month now. You've been more than generous, more than I had any right to expect. But I can't keep taking your charity without understanding what you expect from me." Thomas set down the bucket he'd been holding. "What do you think I expect?" She met his eyes directly. "I don't know, and that's what frightens me. In my experience, men always want something. They're just not always honest about what it is." The words stung, but Thomas understood why she had to say them. Trust was earned, not given, and he'd had 5 years to learn to live with himself while she'd had 5 years of learning that the world was not a safe place for women alone. "I expect you to keep doing what you're doing," he said quietly. "Cooking, helping around the place. I expect you to stay as long as you need to, or as long as you want to. And I expect you to know that you're safe here. Whatever you've been through, whatever you're afraid of, it's not going to happen under my roof." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for me?" Thomas thought about Margaret, about Sarah and Daniel, about all the ways love could leave a person hollow. "Because this house needs you as much as you need it," he said. "Maybe more. It's been dead for 5 years, and you brought it back to life. That's worth more than any wage I could pay you." She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. "I don't want to be your housekeeper forever." "Then don't be," Thomas said. "Stay until you figure out what you want to be. Stay until you're ready to leave. Stay as long as you need to." Clara looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her deciding, weighing her options, her fears against her hopes. Finally, she nodded. "All right," she said. "I'll stay. For now." Winter turned to spring, and spring to summer. Clara stayed. The ranch prospered in ways it hadn't for years, not just because the work was shared but because there was reason again for the work. Thomas found himself planning for the future, thinking about improvements to the house, about expanding the herd, about all the things he'd let slide when there had been no one to build for. Clara bloomed like the wildflowers in the high meadow. The haunted look left her eyes, replaced by something peaceful, something that looked almost like happiness. She laughed more, her smiles coming easier. She started talking about her past without that careful guardedness, sharing stories about her mother, her childhood, the dreams she'd had before the fire took them away. They never spoke about what they were becoming to each other. It happened too slowly, too naturally, for words. It was in the way Thomas made sure to fix her coffee exactly how she liked it. It was in the way Clara saved the best pieces of meat for his plate. It was in the way they sat closer by the fire as the months passed, until their shoulders touched and neither moved away. It was in the way Thomas's heart jumped when he heard her singing in the kitchen, and the way Clara's eyes followed him when he came in from the fields. It was Sarah who finally named it when she came to visit in August, surprising them both by arriving on the stage from Helena with her husband and 2 small children. She took one look at Clara, at the way her father smiled when he looked at this woman who had clearly made herself at home, and pulled Thomas aside. "Who is she, Pa?" Sarah asked, and there was no judgment in her voice, only curiosity and perhaps a hint of relief. Thomas told her the story, all of it, from the Christmas blizzard to this summer day. Sarah listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she hugged him hard. "Ma would have liked her," she said. "And she would have told you to stop being a fool and admit you're in love with her." Thomas pulled back, startled. "I'm not, you are," Sarah said firmly. "And unless I'm completely mistaken, she loves you too. Don't waste time, Pa. Life's too short and too hard to spend it alone when you don't have to be." That night, after Sarah and her family had gone to bed, Thomas found Clara on the porch, watching the stars. He stood beside her, gathering his courage the way he used to before asking Margaret to dance at the town socials all those years ago. "Clara," he said, and she turned to him, her face soft in the moonlight. "I need to tell you something." She waited, patient as always, and Thomas took a breath and spoke the truth that had been building in him for months. "When you came here on Christmas, I thought I was just helping someone in need. But you've become more than that. You've become necessary. You've become home." He stumbled over the words, wishing he had Margaret's grace with language, but pushed on. "I love you. I know it might be too soon, I know you might not feel the same way, but I needed you to know." Clara's eyes shimmered with tears, but she was smiling, really smiling, in a way that lit up her whole face. "Thomas," she said, and it was the first time she'd called him by his first name. "I've been in love with you since March, when you brought me wildflowers because you thought they'd brighten the kitchen. I just didn't think I had the right to tell you." Thomas felt something break open in his chest, something that had been locked tight for 5 years. He reached for her hand, and she gave it to him, her fingers lacing through his. "Then stay," he said. "Not as my housekeeper. Not as someone just passing through. Stay as my wife. Stay forever." Clara's tears spilled over, but she was laughing too, a sound of pure joy that rang out into the summer night. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll stay." They were married in September, with Sarah and her family there to witness it, and Daniel, who came home for the first time in 3 years, drawn by his sister's letter. The whole town turned out, curious about Thomas Brennan's bride, the woman who had walked out of a Christmas storm and into his life. Clara stood beside Thomas in a simple blue dress, her hand steady in his, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed her and felt complete for the first time since Margaret had died. That night, lying beside Clara in the darkness, Thomas thought about all the strange paths that had led them both to this moment. She had lost everything and nearly died seeking shelter. He had spent 5 years learning to live with loneliness. And on one Christmas Eve, in the midst of a blizzard that could have killed her, they had found each other. "I love you," he whispered, and Clara curled closer, her head on his chest. "I love you too," she said. "Thank you for giving me a home when I had nowhere to go." Thomas kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his. "You gave me one too," he said. "I just didn't know I needed it until you arrived." Outside, the wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the promise of winter to come. But inside the Broken Creek Ranch house, there was warmth and light and love, and 2 people who had found in each other what they'd both thought lost forever. The road ahead would have its hardships, as all roads did in this harsh and beautiful land. But they would walk it together, and that made all the difference. Clara had walked through a blizzard to find a home, and in doing so, she had given Thomas his home back. It was enough. It was everything. It was the truest gift Christmas had ever given either of them, and they would cherish it for all the days to come.